Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. I'm doing a series of spotlights on remarkable business brokers from across the country. Hey, the Great Resignation is a topic on a lot of people's minds. So joining me on this segment is Jeff Adam. He's the founder of Adam Noble Group out of Dallas, Texas. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mark. Look forward to talking with you.
Jeff, tell us a little bit about your work and specifically who are the types of folks that you help?
Um, well, Mark, we basically work with buyers and sellers across the country. There are a couple of specialties that we have, but generally, typically, it's going to start with someone that owns a business that is thinking of doing something differently. At the same time, while they're exiting, they're planning an exit. Someone is considering entering a business, and we do a great job of matching people and companies with in both of those directions.
Now, people have been talking about this great resignation in the last year or so. Has that affected your field in any way? Have you seen an influx as people are suspecting leaving the corporate world and wanting to do something more significant?
It has. I mean, we've seen this periodically, kind of over the last 30 years, but certainly this past 18 to 24 months, I would say it's accelerated. We're seeing individuals that are contacting us, looking to acquire a business and make a significant change after, 20 or 30 years in the corporate world, as an example, as well as regional changes. Someone moving from California wanting to come to Texas, wanting to go from Texas to the Northeast, perhaps where they grew up. So the amount of qualified buyers that are coming into the space who probably in the past 5 or 10 years had not considered acquiring a business is substantial and accelerating.
So, buying or selling a business, of course, is a broad topic. So, folks that are reaching out to you now, do they know what they don't know, or what are like the big questions on their minds? What do you get most commonly from folks calling you?
That's a great question. And the reality is, it's the full A to Z. Generally, if someone's starting the process, they generally don't aren't familiar with it. They may have done some research. There's certainly the standard methods. You can check the internet, you can read books, you can talk to folks. But the reality is that the space of buying and selling businesses, especially small privately held one, is a very, very small industry. There's only about 4,000 companies like mine across the United States. Compare that to the 1 or 2 million real estate brokers, as an example, in the United States. So the source of the information is a little bit more limited. And anecdotal sources of information are problematic because while someone may have had an experience buying or selling a single business, that's what they're limited to, is their experience of buying or selling one single business. And most folks haven't had that. So, being able to speak with someone and ask some basic questions like, I'm thinking about buying a business. How are business valued? How do I find them? Why does the seller want the entire process to be discreet and confidential? How do I get financing? How do I feel confident that this is the right business for me? Those are all very, very basic questions, and they're ones that really start with situation analysis by the individual.
I imagine when folks get excited about this, they probably have come at you with a list of questions, is what it sounds like.
Uh,
Backing up for a second though, when folks consider, hey, I want to, do something for myself finally, do you find that people kind of gravitate towards buying an existing business versus starting one completely from scratch on their own? What kind of, things do you hear out there from people and their desires to purchase an existing business and kind of give us a little bit of insight on what the benefit of that is?
again, it's a great question. The reality is I think that most folks have this idealistic sense of I can start a company, I can start a business, I can start something. But the reality is that having watched not one or 100, but thousands and thousands of these types of transactions over the years, starting a business is not easy. And starting the business and then having it be profitable and able to put food on the table, or whatever your goals are for you and your family, are not things that are typically easily done. And the vast majority of these small businesses, when they start up as ideas, unfortunately aren't there in 3 or 4 or 5 years. Is buying the business the right thing to do? Well, the reality is that's fraught with issues as well. You can certainly have situations where the owner of a business perhaps isn't fully forthcoming in terms of what their business is, or the reality is they're exiting. So they're exiting for a reason. And so you've got to ask, my standard kind of comment is ask why 3 times, and you'll ultimately get to, the crux of the matter as to why they're trying to sell. So that range, probably the pendulum is swings more to folks wanting to start their business. The reality is more people probably buy their business when they make a transition into the entrepreneurial type space. And the biggest advantage of that is there's a track record. There's clearly a business that has opportunities. There's clearly a business that has hopefully made money and will continue to make money. But more importantly, the person that's making that transition from whatever they used to be doing, perhaps as an employee, to an entrepreneur, they're not going to have to do everything. Yes, they'll have to be the chief cook and bottle wash, person, once they acquire the business, but they'll be able to focus on the business instead of just being consumed with the startup process. If you haven't been through a startup, the startup process is challenging. It's a lot of fun. It's energizing, but it can also beat the life out of you.
And I can imagine starting your own business is kind of like writing a book and starting with a blank sheet of paper. So that must be very intimidating, and buying something with a track record could certainly give you an advantage there. Jeff, when folks reach out to you, do they already know the type of business that they want to purchase or look at? Or can you kind of give us some insight into how people should choose the type of business they want to get into if they're not quite sure?
When individuals, and let me kind of start with individuals first. When individuals reach out to us and say that, look, I'm thinking about making a transition, and frankly, it follows a seasonality to it. Even certainly we are in the midst of the Great Migration, as you introduced. But the reality is there's also seasonality to it. And if you think about it for a minute, it kind of makes sense. Generally people are creatures of habit. They hit the end of the calendar year. They go through that period, and they typically take stock. They take stock of their life, what they're happy about, what are the things they perhaps want to make change about. Obviously, we as humans, especially in America, January 1st, the first month of the year also often circles back with a refocus on personal fitness, as an example. Well, in a space of one's personal life, one often will decide that, I'm happy with my job, I'm not happy with my job, I'm ready to make my move. And as the calendar year rolls over, that is the peak season. So the peak season from January, is the first peak is January through May. The second peak is kind of September through mid-November. So as individuals are in that position and they start to want to make that change and reach out to a firm such as ours, generally, honestly, they don't know what they want. They just know typically if they want to make a change, they typically want to work for themselves. So we'll basically help them with questions. We have a criteria for acquisition package that we'll send to them. And essentially it asks kind of, self-discovery is too strong of a descriptor, but it's those type of questions. What do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing? Where do you want to be? How much money do you need now, to support your expenses and your lifestyle and support your family? Geographically, where do you want to be? Are you currently in San Francisco and you want to go to, Dallas? Are you currently in the South and you want to go up to Chicago, where the weather's, actually has 4 seasons, unlike some of the southern parts that only have 2 or 3 seasons, so to speak. But those are the basic kind of questions they'll typically ask. Often they'll know what they don't want. So as an example, someone may, have a fervent desire to avoid the restaurant or food service hospitality industry. And I get it. I respect that. The flip side is they may want to get into food service because they've always enjoyed cooking and serving food to other folks. By the same token, they may have some ideas in terms of how to make something, a better widget. That's certainly the type of story that I love in America, in terms of having an idea and being able to implement something that takes something from the ability to make 2 in 5 minutes to being able to make 10 in 5 minutes, whatever it be. So that process, so that discovery process typically is going to reduce, a target from this size to something smaller. And interestingly, it sometimes does it more by eliminating types of businesses that are not a fit versus, focusing on, from the start at businesses that are a fit. But that process, especially, making it iterative and kind of going back and forth, and then combining that with what does someone have in terms of resources, time, financial, family support, spouses, support in terms of what someone's going to do, get going. And when you collectively, take all those together, that is generally a successful way to start the process of looking at businesses and to start the change process. The reality is that most buyers are going to look at multiple businesses, and they should look at multiple businesses. What you expect a business to be at the outset, as soon as you peel back a few layers of the onion, often is different than what it actually is. And at the same time, you're dealing with humans. Businesses are living, breathing organisms. They're not bricks and mortar like real estate. So, there's a seller or a partnership that's selling the business, and then there's an individual or family or group of people that are buying the business, and they've got to be the right fit together. They've got to have that right rapport, value. They've got to be able to trust each other. There's a common thing that I will tell folks, all the way to the closing table, and that is that, by the time we get to closing, this has got to be the right business for you to buy, and this has got to be the right business for the seller to sell to you, type thing. Because if it isn't, both parties shouldn't proceed. This is America. Something's going to go wrong. People don't often blame themselves. They typically blame the other party, and nobody's going to be happy if it doesn't go well. The flip side is, if that rapport has been there and there's a good commitment, a good process, then after closing, the sale is going to have a good transition. And we typically follow up with buyer and seller for 2 years after the transaction. That's unusual in our industry. And the reason we do is because, we genuinely want everybody to, to have a good exit and then a good entrance. We want that seller to be able to provide us with an excellent testimonial. And at the same time, we want the buyer to, 5 years from now, when they, quadrupled the business and are ready to perhaps pursue another business, we want them to call us first to discuss where the business is and how to help them exit and get into their next one.
Jeff, you have over 3 decades of experience in this. Can you kind of take us back a little bit, and what inspired you to even get started in this field? How'd you get started?
Well, honestly, I started my own, companies over the years and had sold them. Didn't really have good experience with some of the advisors that I had interacted with in the field. And so in the mid 90s, came across an organization that essentially helped you, value businesses and understand the process to take to market. And as soon as I saw their package, they had a binder that was about this thick, and I don't remember. I think they were selling it for, $8,000 or $9,000, but I literally just wrote my check, got the binder, and hit the races and went off. Pulled open my Rolodex and just contacted companies, individuals that I knew that were really looking to make that move. And I've never looked back. I've sold over 600 companies, and love doing it. Absolutely love the process.
Excellent. Couple more questions for you, Jeff. It's such a broad topic. I'd imagine there's a lot of myths or misconceptions floating around the internet about buying a business. What's like the biggest myth or misconception that you hear from folks?
Yeah, truthfully, I think that there's not one biggest one. I think there are many, many. So a very common misconception has to do with values of business. More and more as individuals have been able to save money and have 401ks and invest in stock markets, they're probably familiar with things like stock market multiples. Stock market multiples are multiples of earnings, and they're not unusually 14, 16, 18. Sometimes they're 20 and 30 and so forth. Well, those multiples are not the type of multiples that apply in the small privately held business space. In fact, and ironically, the sale of small privately held businesses is not available in a public database. It's not, as an example, in real estate, you have things like the multiple listing services where you can go and get comparable data and sales. So we have those type of things in small business sales, but they're not available to the public. So as an example, a small business, that's doing 400,000 in sales and netting $75,000 of owner's benefit, that's not going to sell for 14 times what the owner does. That's typically going to sell, in a range of 2, 3, 4 times, depending on the type of business and what its history has been and what its future is, and what the physical assets are in the business and so forth. But that's probably the biggest single misconception, and it happens both on the part of sellers or prospective sellers, business owners who want their business to be worth gazillions when perhaps it's not worth a gazillion. And by the same token, purchasers that want to pay a smaller amount for a business that truthfully is worth more. That's probably one of the biggest misconception. Another significant misconception is that that someone is going to be able to get into a business and come in Thursdays for 30 minutes and sign paychecks and leave. That's just not the nature of small privately held businesses. If you're a small privately held business owner, you are working your tail off. You're receiving the merits of your efforts, but the reality is without your efforts, your business doesn't produce a service or a product that gets you paid, and consequently you don't make money. So the misconception of not understanding that working for yourself, while it's romantic, it can be romanticized, the reality is it's significant work. It really is.
Fascinating insight. Jeff, before I ask you my last question, for folks out there that are thinking, need to work with a business broker or find one, what do you think is the most important thing someone should look for in a business broker that they're considering working with?
I think that I'll preface my remarks by saying this: you should talk to as many brokers as possible. Whether you call them business brokers or M&A advisors, it doesn't matter what you call them. They're all kind of a similar ilk. And the reality is you should talk to as many as possible. The more you speak with, the more you'll get a better sense for, number one, do they really seem to know what they're talking about? Number two, are they just trying to push me in a direction versus educate me so that I can make a better decision? And third, do they really have my interests at heart? As an example, in the state of Texas, business brokerage is not regulated by the Texas Real Estate Commission. So consequently, if you have a business broker working with you on the purchase of the business, the reality is they probably represent the seller of the business and not the purchaser, and they should be telling you that right up front. So those are kind of the things that they should be, sharing with you immediately in terms of process.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's such a really specialized field, and related to how many realtors there are, business brokers. In fact, linked to that question, if folks are looking to try to find them online, what do they even Google? Is it business broker, merger, acquisition? What do you guys categorize online?
Generally the kind of things you should search for would be business brokers, M&A advisors, so merger and acquisition advisor, business valuation. There are some great industry websites that are probably the largest kind of in the industry, where you can see an assortment of brokers on that, and that would be places like BizBuySell, BizQuest, BrokerWorks, businessesforsale.com. Those are other places to start. And then once you've found 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever they are, visit their websites. They ought to have something that describes who they are. They ought to have some testimonials. They ought to have some educational process information that's available on their website. They may or may not have some examples of what's for sale, but there certainly should be some examples of some closed transactions. So as an example, or very specifically, if you're looking for restaurants, then you're going to want to try to find a business broker that specializes in that space. By the same token, if you're looking for manufacturing, and that business broker, on their business for sale only has restaurants for sale, well, then that's probably not the right fit. You need to go on to a different brokerage firm. I think it's that simple though. No need to make it overly complicated. Don't replace it though with the FaceTime of talking with the actual broker or multiple brokers in the office. Expect them to ask you some questions. Expect some of those questions to be a little bit invasive. As an example, they're going to ask you how much money you have available to buy a business with. don't be defensive about that, because the reality is there's no point in showing you a business that's selling for $5 million. If you have $100,000 and can afford to buy a business that's really selling for, at a price point of 300,000 to 500,000. So the question is an appropriate question.
Jeff, this has been terrific. For folks listening that would love to speak with you, how do they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Best way is to just go to our website. It's adamnoble.com. That's ADAMNOBLE.com. My name is Jeff Adam. I'm the president. Find that we're very, very responsive service-wise. So if you ping us with an inquiry through our website, we'll make sure that the right person gets back to you and starts a conversation, and works with you to educate you through the process of selling or buying or valuing a business, whatever it might be.
This has been terrific. Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with my audience today. And I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Great. Well, thank you. It was great talking to you, Mark.
That was Jeff Adam, the founder of Adam Noble Group. And this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for tuning in.